So about 10 minutes later, I got a message from Gordon saying, "Sweet baby Jesus, did you send this to me on Christmas midnight on purpose?" I was like, you're right. See you in January.
Welcome to Cardboard Creations, where we discuss the process, techniques, and inspiration for designing board games. I'm your host, Candice Harris, and I'm really pumped to be here today with Dávid Turczi to find out how Excavation Earth was created. But first, let's jump into a brief overview of how Excavation Earth plays. Excavation Earth is a market manipulation and set collection game where 1 to 4 players take on the role of unique alien factions on a mission to recover artifacts from the now uninhabited Earth. Each round starts with players drafting a hand of multi-use cards that are used to perform actions. Players take turns performing actions that allow them to move their explorers around the world map, excavate artifacts at dig sites, add buyers to influence different markets and affect prices, and then send traders to sell artifacts to the market buyers, or wheel and deal selling them on the black market to earn credits. Whenever you acquire new artifacts, you may take samples of them in your gallery on your player board. At the end of the game, players may earn additional credits for artifact samples in their galleries. Excavation Earth ends after 3 rounds, and the player with the most credits wins. Hi, Dávid. Welcome to the show.
Hello, and it's good to be here.
You are my first guest on Cardboard Creations outside of the U.S.
All right. Well,
so very, very special.
Welcome from over here from the Netherlands, even though I don't speak the language yet.
I'm really excited to have you on today. Whenever I'm looking around for new games, I feel like I constantly see your name popping up as either designer, co-designer, solo mode designer. You're just like, I don't know how you do it all, but you somehow manage to. Teamwork.
The trick is teamwork. I always say that, like, for me, there are 2 interesting parts of making the game. The before the game is playable, the conceptualization, and then the keeping all the threads together once it's almost ready. But the latter one is almost a managerial job, while the first one is almost an architectural artistry job. So I always do this on 1 or 2 projects at a time, and I do this on 2 or 3 projects at a time, and there's another 6 of them that I just reply to emails and other people do stuff. So that's how it looks like. I work on dozens of games, and sure, my project checklist is roughly 30 games long, but on do something that's like 3-4 games any given time window.
Yeah, that is very impressive. Yeah, so you have so many games that you've worked on and that you're working on, but I figured Excavation Earth would be a good one to start with because the journey of it, the story, it has a unique theme kind of within that sci-fi spectrum, and then it also has like a really interesting mix of mechanics. There's like some pick up and deliver, there's set collection, market manipulation, which I love, and area majority, and some other things like sprinkled in there. So I figured it'd be a good one to discuss. So where did the initial inspiration come from for Excavation Earth?
That is the strangest and longest backstories ever. I'll try to summarize it in short. I have written public posts about it, so anyone wanting to dig it out, they can. 4, 5, 6, I don't know, years ago. I'm losing the ancient times now. But I do remember that it was a hot July night somewhere in suburban London. My the ex-wife, well, at the time she was, I think, my future wife, woke me up saying, that's it, I've designed the game. I'm like, it's 4 a.m. We'll play it in 2 years. Good night. She was like, no, but it's great. It'll be ready by Sunday. I'm like, okay. Bye. Back to sleep. So by Sunday, she had a prototype made out of word art, like all new game designers like to. And it was about a twisted fantasy world, but like not like dark twisted, but like cheeky twisted. And it was that they are all going out to the horse races, like inspired by the UK Derby culture, which is both a serious and a parody of itself somehow. And and then you're playing as like power brokers or something, and you have to get influence with the guild of assassin princesses and the totally not fake wizard club. And I was like, okay, theme sounds very cool. What are we doing?
Yeah.
What mechanisms are interesting here? And at the time, Glory to Rome was probably the game that was hitting our table the most.
Oh, yeah.
So she was like, I want multi-use cards. Okay, let's do multi-use. Show me. And for the first couple of iterations, it was more like play the game, see a problem, cross it out with the corrector, change the rule, play again. And sure, I helped, sure, I offered advice, but it was more like, you know, letting her trial and error her way through stuff. And then, but then, okay, what are we actually doing? How do you win? And then, because it was at the horse races, like, let's put the horses in focus. And is it a racing game? No, let's make it a betting game, because it's so funny that the dwarves bet on the unicorns. And but the mechanisms that were working were not a betting game. It was more like you draft cards that can be invested either to make one of the horses go better or into given to one of the guilds to get influence. So it was more like a futures trade, like a abstract stock market game. There were no actual stock going up and down in price, but it definitely felt like you're investing into something that pays out in the future. And then, of course, we did all the silly jokes about the victory points were called meatballs, because who knows what happens to the unicorns after the horse races. And then to get a little sense of build up, it's like, and there was a mechanism where when you invested into the guild to get friends, then you would get your cubes onto their guild board. And then if you sold them your horse shares, then they get promoted into account managers. And if you've played Excavation Earth, this is starting to get familiar at this point, because these are the traders and the envoys today. The smarter and smarter and the less random and the less chaotic the mechanisms, the more they distilled we got to a point where we had a truly playable and, say, interesting game that didn't make any sense. Because the theme existed before the mechanisms, and when during discussion we bumbled onto a working mechanism, I never suggested to change the theme, because she got excited by the theme at the beginning. So I'm not going to come and say, sorry, the unicorns have to go, even though every serious publisher said, no, you can't call the victory points meatballs. But nobody quite put their finger on the problem. When it was finished, I showed it to Mighty Boards. I have worked with them in the past on both Dave Kirkhope's Petrichor, and they were publishing Days of Fire and Nights of Fire. That was more like my side of project that they joined in, whereas Petrichor was Dave's project. And Gordon, who the designer of Vengeance and Posthume and a couple others, like, I knew him, but I always worked with Dave. And then Gordon was like, show me a game. And I showed him this game, and he was like, okay, I think I understand what's smart about this, and I don't know what's wrong, but it just doesn't make any sense. I'm like, okay, what part? You invest into here, the horse moves forward, and then when you cash in your shares, if your horse is ahead, then you get more money. But he's like, so which horse do I want to win? I'm like, no. This is not a horse race game. This is a horse share trading game where we represent the share values by the horses moving on a race. That doesn't make any sense. A horse race is not a slow moving frozen frame image movie where people standing by the side and quickly trading shares. Like, you're right.
What were your steps, you and Yi, to create the actual prototype and get it to a place
I mean,
where
I've had a few published games by this point, so even though the graphics only progressively evolved out of word art, but like I knew how to make a game. This was like along my journey of how to turn from a lucky designer at the right place at the right time to a professional process on how to weed out good ideas from publishable games and vice versa. But like there was no science yet behind it. So when we would play the game, I could say that mechanism is wrong, and then she would say, "Oh, should we try that mechanism?" I'm like, "Yes, but then you're tossing that out, and you're not fixing that issue." And then we would sit on it, and then I would offer something, and then she would tweak it a bit, and then we play again. It was a perfectly playable, fun, strategic game that only people who put in the effort to understand it as a personal favor understood it. And I tried to explain it to Dave Kirkhope, I tried to explain it to Gordon, and it's like, yeah, but like, can you explain it to me in a different way? So I was like, okay, so you spend these easily acquirable assets to get this future holding, and then you invest into a trading position so that you can sell it at the right time for a high value. Okay, so you're doing a commodity trading game. Yes. Okay, then what should that commodity be? And let's just leave the representation of a horse race out of it. And but the mechanically interesting bit was that in most more like what's the first game that will pop into my mind? Navigador or Raccoon Tycoon, like games that are about commodity trading. You have money. You spend a bit of money, then you to get stock, then you spend actions to drive up the price of the stock, and then you cash it out. Whereas in Excavation Earth, you essentially started from no money. Every time designers get asked the question, is it the theme or the mechanism first? Excavation Earth is the perfect example for both. It's like the mechanism created a bad theme, but the bad theme created a good mechanism. The good mechanism created a good theme that created a better mechanism. And it's like there is no mechanism or theme here. And so in Excavation Earth, you just go and pick up the commodity. When it was unicorn, you just play the card saying, I think the unicorn is moving, and then you move the unicorn forward or the Pegasus forward or the whatever. So you didn't have to pay to, because the early versions had pay both hay cubes to move the unicorns, but it was boring because turn 1 you went and picked up the hay cubes, turn 2 you went and spent the hay cubes. So I was like, what if you just cut out the hay cubes? And because of that, we had a commodity trading game where you don't have to buy commodities, you just sell them. So what sort of commodity is it that you don't buy, just sell? And we just went through a long list, and no, that fails here. No, that fails here. And I don't even remember whether it was me or the Mighty Boys, but it was like a group effort. Everybody liked half of it, disliked the other half. We worked together, and Gordon is a master of summarizing a story into 3 sentences and having to make sense. And finally gelled into archaeology. The other interesting mechanism badly represented in the Unicorns game was that every time you did something with the Pegasus or the unicorn or the zombie donkey, then the zombie donkey moved forward on the track. And the stocks didn't have unit value. It wasn't like you buy a block of cheese for 3 gold. It was like whichever horse was ahead, you could sell a share in for 9. Whichever horse was second ahead, you can sell a share for 5. Which meant that we had to have this majority of perceived value. And this is the first of the mechanisms in the game where I feel I added something fundamentally new. And that is the museum queues. Because I said, okay, so if our commodities are artifacts, then and we're selling it to the museums, then whichever artifact the most people want to see is the one that's the most valuable. How do you represent it? You physically queue up visitors in front of the museums, and then the red artifact is worth more than the yellow artifact if there are more red people queuing up. And then I created a proto. I played it. I think it was not Gordon, but Dave I played it with. And he said, it's very smart, but could we make it cooler? What if the pieces were hot air balloons? Because I did it like 1920s Indiana Jones style.
Okay.
And I was like, sure, I'm happy to change the player pieces to hot air balloons, but the movement in the game doesn't behave like hot air ballooning. Then we need something else that makes it cool. And then about 3 weeks later, Gordon sent an email to all of us that had the what about I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens meme in the middle of it. It's like, and we were like, you're insane, that will never work. And that's when I'm pretty sure that was Gordon who came up with the idea of the and if it wasn't, and I'm sorry whoever I'm misattributing, I think it was him that came up with the idea of, first of all, these are not museums, these are markets, and we are not selling human artifacts to aliens. We are aliens coming here digging up the earth that went extinct. And it's not a post-apocalyptic game, it's just random aliens excavating a random crappy backwater planet. and this was so crazy that we prioritized the ideas, and we were like, yeah, that's insane, let's start with the diamond trading, that will obviously work. And it's like, okay, what are your actions in diamond trading? Well, you can polish it, you can send to the market so that more people like. Yeah, and how is this exciting? Yeah, let's go back to the aliens. So, and once we had the alien, the mechanical problem the game had, that it was too pure market manipulation game. All you had to do was buy A, buy B, invest into this, see what the others are investing in, and then sell. And you did this loop 2.5 times in the game. And everyone who did this loop badly lost. And they were like, could there be like other strategies? Pretty quickly, we came up with, I remember sitting on the very congested London bus talking it over with why we came up with the black market idea, that you can buy them at above price or sell them below price, but without having to prepare. And then it was like, okay, now we don't depend on what artifacts are diggable, because at least we can buy the rest from black market. Yeah, but that's still the same strategy. You're still buying them. How about we make them asymmetric? Nah, only bad games need fundamental asymmetry because they can't make the core good enough. Let's make the core good enough. Okay, let's try out the asymmetric factions. One of them will make action 1 better, one of them will make action 2. And then after, it's like, okay, those 3 work, those 3 doesn't. Let's make them better. And once after a few while, that asymmetry started driving the game, because there were still only 1.5 strategies in the game to do. Go dig up an artifact, advertise it, get the right colored meeples and sell it. But how you do it was suddenly varied. It's like, okay, let's start leaning. And then the Gordon was playing it to other people, explaining the game, and then he came back saying, look, they're disappointed because I'm telling them this epic story about how, and none of this epicness is in the game. What could we do? So we were like, okay, so how about instead of just promoting your traders to master traders, we send them up to the spaceship above Earth? But then that needs to do something. So what should the mechanism be? Then when somebody else complained about lack of perceived replayability, then came the command cards, the yellow and white cards. And then the cubes initially in the design, they used to be a speed limiter so that you can't rush ahead too fast, and then later in design they switched to a capacity cap so that you can't do everything you want in the game.
No, you can't.
and once we had the mothership, then the mechanism came that you can get them back as a cost, which is actually a benefit.
Wow.
And that all came from we want something epic to float above the earth.
As you were developing, what was your playtesting process like? Was it just internal with the Mighty Boards dev team, or were you pulling in outside resources? Like, can you talk about like the playtesting process and, you know, how much you did?
Back when I lived in London, I went full time in 2018. And at the time, I was pretty much like, I was lucky enough to find 3 or 4 regular friends of mine who either were students or had freelancer jobs, or basically people who could make it from 10 to 6 on a Thursday morning. And then we had like a regular, not every week, but like 3 out of 4 weeks, people would come over, they would get lunch in return, and they would play whatever games I wanted them to play. And once I went full time and pretty much saw professional improvements being done either by others on my game or asked of me to be done on others' games, I was like, let's do this on the games that I'm just designing for fun as well. And people were there, we were playing it. One of them was very good at breaking the numbers. The other one was very good at pinpointing which piece they don't want to understand. After 2019 SN, when I met my current partner and current co-designer, completely other games, some of which are Mighty Boards, Norali, the very first personal piece of information I learned about her is that she can beat me at any game ever, always.
Nice.
And she had her own game group here, and I was like, hey, do you want to help me? What have you need? Well, here's this 80% finished game. Can you guys play it and tell me how you like it? Mm-hmm. And so I had a playtest group in the UK. She was running a playtest group here in the Netherlands, and the Mighty Boards was running a playtest group in Malta. And Gordon was collecting the feedback of, the way I like to call it, the normal people, the ones that, yeah, sure, they can handle heavy games, but they don't eat Lacerda for breakfast.
Gotcha.
And while I was playing in the UK with the analytical method, some of them wannabe game designers, some of them are. Fabio Lopiano was part of that team, and he's a famous published game designer. So you know, all sorts of skill sets. And Nor was playing here with hardcore gamers.
Yeah.
And when I moved over here a few months later, they could play the game so well that I couldn't beat, obviously never Nor, but none of the other members of her group I could beat at Excavation Earth ever. Wow. So when we were getting to the point, I mean, I tend to lose my own playtest most of the time, and I tend to play with my playtesters tend to be the people who can beat me. That's a pre-selection. But like, this was like a next level. Like, they were like 30% better than me in the game. And as we were getting closer and closer to the launch, and more and more kind of people's criticisms came in, essentially the playtesting devolved into Gordon trying to simplify something, Norali and her group immediately breaking the game because that simplification removed that block that stopped them from abusing that rule.
Yeah.
And me designing a super overcomplicated fix, and then Gordon saying, yes, but can you halve the complication? What if you do this? And I say, you're wrong, but that means that there's a halfway fix that fixes it. We're done.
Wow.
Send it out to a new game of Gordon's people. New complaints come back. Repeat. And then the two or three of these repeated, I dare you to simplify it. No, you can't. Yeah. You broke the game. I dare you to fix it. Got us to the point where okay, now we can publish the game. So
very cool.
That was an exciting journey indeed.
That sounds fun. I love how you had like different groups, like different types of players involved.
Just because if the only criteria of game goodness is do I like it, then that'll sell 1,300 copies at best.
Yeah.
You know, there are a few games out there that only I like, and luckily I'm in a position where even some people want that, but more and more it's about figuring out what people like, figuring out which part is the bit I insist on, and then just creating this laser sight between the two and improve. And Excavation Earth was the game where I didn't know how to do it when I started. And in reflection, I now am a lot more confident in doing stuff like this again.
That's really, really cool. How did you, or like what point did you guys come up with the different factions having different powers, like special abilities, and how did you kind of just develop those?
I spent so long insisting that it can't be done that when they said we have to, because we have to sell the beautiful drawings that we commissioned the artist from.
The art is awesome.
I was like, all right, then I'll just pick the 6 actions and each faction will do one of the 6 actions better. And then the boring actions were not fun to be good at. And the good actions were broken to be good at. And it was essentially figuring out the lowest limitation for the latter that's still fun, and fixing the not fun actions to be fun so that their specialization becomes fun by itself. Survey is the best example. The psychics do exactly the same thing since what they've done since version 1. And when Survey in its original form, they were the weakest faction. Then in Survey in their simplified form, they were the strongest faction.
Yeah.
And in their final balanced Survey action, their asymmetry was naturally the benchmark for everything else. And so it's with Excavation Earth, if somebody said design 10 more factions, I couldn't design 10 more factions because like most rich world asymmetry, nations, the aliens, houses in, I don't know, in a Twilight Imperium-like game or something, what you would do is you design your game system, try it out symmetric, and then you look at your setting and what bits of that setting is represented in that mechanisms, and then you write little stories for each of your factions that do a part of your setting differently, and then you figure out how you model that mechanically. In Excavation Earth, this went absolutely the other way around. We had such a tight, at the beginning, too tight mechanical framework, because you could just dig up the artifact, market it and sell it, that was like, okay, nobody could come in and say, all right, let's design aliens that can that can teleport around and have invisible jets. I'm like, great, the movement doesn't work like that, and there are no vehicles in the. So it's like, it went the other way around. It's like, okay, the person that likes to survey more, how do they work?
Yeah.
Okay, every time they draw more, and one of them they can buy for free. So who are these people? And then Gordon came in, and they're the psychics. They put their hands above the ground and they feel the jugs underneath.
Cool.
Asymmetry was completely mechanism first, but the actual actions and what they do were conceptually mechanism first, but execution-wise theme first. So it's really a one-of-a-kind evolution to me, and well, I know that next game I wouldn't start from meatballs, but I now know it's not impossible.
Cool. And you mentioned the art that was commissioned for Excavation Earth. I love the art. It's just like, it has a really different feel to it, popping colors. Yeah, it's just really unique. So how were the art and graphic design decisions made, and at like what point in your process did like you guys decide to say, okay, let's, like, did you decide on the theme and then say, let's start doing getting some art commissioned immediately?
Well,
or?
that's not a me question.
Okay.
Because Mighty Boards has Mark Kasha, the fantastic graphic designer and creative lead, and the guy who decided what looks pretty on the box. And Gordon has very strong opinions on the matter as well. So
cool. So it's like an in-house decision kind of.
Yeah, these days, today, I am privy to a bit more behind the scenes information. At the time, this was like, hey, here's how your game will look, kind of thing. And then I can complain about, no, that iconography there doesn't mean what you think it means. But yeah, as I said, when this project started, I was not yet a professional at it. So I was like a not completely unknown designer coming in and working with some friendly publisher. But I am talking with Mark over the Discord twice a week and sharing Illustrator files and sketching him what I think it's a different process now. But it involves skills that I didn't have 3 years ago. So
this is really cool how you kind of, I'm sure you just developed over the years the more games you work on, but it seems like you made a significant growth jump from, going from doing it kind of part-time on the side to designing professionally. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a 9 days a week job, so you either learn how to do it well or you die trying.
How did you know when Excavation Earth was finished? Like, were all the playtesting results like, hey, everything's just kind of...
It was finished too late. Like, the public doesn't know. We put up very good unified facade. At the point when we claimed it was finished, it was not yet finished. I am happy that, as far as I know, there are no unsolved problems left in the core in the base game. So there is nothing. Damn, we let it go to print. Why? So I'm very happy. The second wave expansion has like 1 or 2 cards in it, and I'm like, I don't know if those work. Let's fingers crossed. Nobody posted about them on BGG yet. But when I finish a game and after it goes off to print and I don't wake up in the next 3 months to 2 years sweating, holy crap, how did I miss that? I'm such an idiot. Then I know it works, and then I have a set of reference. And as I love improving other people's games, as I love playing other people's good games, the most fun to me is playing a game of some mine that I finished a long time ago, so it's no longer a fresh thought in my head, recognizing that it's working, and then figuring out one thing to make it better. And that's how the most fun expansions are. So my favorite thing about designing these heavy Euros is that time a year and a half later when I realize how can I make it even better without admitting a fault in the original one. And like with I first noticed that this in Die Settlers, one of my earlier games, which lots of people like, it's a, what do you call it? It's like a niche cult hit that completely missed its target audience. But when the expansion came out, I had this feeling of, wow, this game just jumped, and it's like I love it now more. And same thing happened to the Tekkenu. Anachrony obviously started very high, but I proposed the original core idea for Fractures of Time as my 4th most likely expansion candidate, because this will never work. This is so insane that this will never work. And we tried it and broke it 3-5 times. And when it finally clicked, I was like, I can't believe the game I designed supports this. So
that's really cool.
So development and expansion design is the 2 sides of the same coin to me, because one is like figuring out what's not right yet, and the other one is figuring out what else can be even righter.
Yeah. So second wave came out at the same time?
No, second wave is not a proper expansion. It's a collection of stretch goals, collections of components that we finished in flight, collection of stuff that we were like, this would be nice, but nobody needs it per se.
Gotcha.
It's not a proper expansion. It's a zero-day content drop. So
you have a new expansion,
a proper expansion,
expansion coming for Excavation Earth. Can you talk a little bit about it, just briefly?
Yes, thematically, we went accidental full circle. Well, not full circle to the unicorns, but full circle to Indiana Jones. Gordon sent me a message about not a year ago, less than that, like in November or something. And we need an expansion for Excavation Earth. We Kickstarter, more print runs, whatever business things that are not my problem. Publisher tells me make an expansion. David makes an expansion. Problem is, 2020 was the year of COVID.
Yeah.
And Nor can beat the crap out of me in the game. I moved to a new country where I have, at the time, had like 2 people I knew besides Nor. And so it was like, should we pull out Excavation Earth for fun? Never even came up in conversation. So I had this finished game that I've never played in its finished form, in its published form. And I was like, I don't know, like, the game worked, right? We finished it. We should do something. I don't know what we should do for expansion. The game, like, I didn't remember loving the game because I haven't been interacting with it. And obviously, since we separated, it's not like we hang out every day. So I don't talk that often to YE. But while we were selling the London house, in mid-December, somehow it came up in conversation. I think either it was like, when is the next royalty check coming, or some silly topic like this. And like, oh, by the way, I forgot to say, we need to come up with an expansion, and I have give me some theme. You like thinking about theme stuff. And she said to me, how about we do dangerous artifacts and we get rewards for removing them from game. And then talked a bit, and I don't remember whether she said the word museum first or I said the word museum first. So how about, instead of selling them for money, we can now send them to the Galactic Museum. And then my brain does what my brain does, and then 2 to 4 days later, I typed up this concept of, so this is there's a new type of artifact that doesn't match any of the suits and eats up one of your cubes when you excavate it up. But then if you sell it to this way, you get that reward. If you sell it to that way, you get that reward. Complication. And I typed this up and I sent it to Gordon. And typically when my brain is thinking, I'm like outside world and whatnot. So this was December 23rd, 5 minutes to midnight when I did this, and I didn't even look around. So about 10 minutes later, I got a message from Gordon saying, "Sweet baby Jesus, did you send this to me on Christmas midnight on purpose?" I was like, you're right. See you in January. And then in January, I was busy, whatnot. And then around March time, I created this concept. I was like, okay, COVID is almost over. As soon as I got 3 people over, let's verify it. Well, COVID was not over. Yeah. So meanwhile, we did Vengeance Roll and Fight together, co-designed with my loving partner, Noralie. She gave me the missing bit mechanically to how to make the game work. And I never actually got to play the Excavation Earth expansion that I designed halfway through Christmas. And then, as the Roll and Fight campaign was winding up, Gordon sent me a message saying, "So you're handing in the finished expansion 2 weeks from now, right?" So yeah, luckily by then I could have 2 people over. So one of them was part of the original group that played it with Nord 2 years ago. So he was very good at the game. The other one is the kind of person that can beat me at any game by their second play the latest. So, like, we dove in. And then, of course, everything broke on the new stuff. Because Excavation Earth is so tight that if you add too much leeway, then you have an infinite button. If you add too little leeway, then why would anybody ever go there?
Right. And balance. It's a tight balance.
It's like, we have 2 options. We either toss this whole thing in the bin and hope to come up with something better, or we laser-focus develop. And luckily, Mighty Boards has expanded the team. They now have a few very good in-house developers that I had the pleasure to work with on Roll and Fight. I was like, Gordon, give me John. I need help. And just like, here are my problems. Here are my possible solutions. Help. And then for the next 3 to 4 weeks, like I didn't play it every week. I played it every second week, and he played it in between. It was just like zoop, 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 and nothing of the core concept has changed after the second play of the expansion. Everything else was just like what should the reward be, how often should the reward trigger, and how much should the action cost. And it was just like, done. And the theme makes sense. Now there's this museum board, and you can send the right artifacts into the right exhibition. And because you have the buyer meeples that can queue up on the markets, now they can also be visitor meeples that queue up at the museum. And I just went, that's full circle to the Indiana Jones. So what should we call the expansion? Something Space Museum. I was like, no, how about we call it It Belongs in a Museum, which is a quote from Indiana Jones. And when I sent them the pretty prototype, now having learned InDesign and Illustrator, the strange and mysterious artifacts were a subwoofer, a taxidermied raccoon, and a garden sprinkler, and they all got the joke and they went, yeah, this belongs in a museum. So that's how
cool.
we ended up with
cool.
the expansion.
Very cool. So I know that I think Nick Shaw worked on the solo mode for Excavation Earth, but
yes.
I feel like you, to me, are famous for creating these awesome solo modes for games in general. So many games. I'm like David Turczi on solo mode. So I want...
Do you know the story behind why am I so famous for creating so many solo modes?
No, I want to hear
because
that.
I never play them and I don't like them.
So you're trying to make it so it's something that you might want to play.
That's what was my original intention, but then, as you might have noticed, I talk a lot and I engage on everything and jump on everything and think about everything and want to append one more sentence to everything. Now imagine me playing a solo mode. The way that goes is that I look at the player aid of the steps the bot needs to do. I start executing the first step, at which point I remember something I want to do on my next turn. At which then I go, no, you have to continue with the bot. Then I do the second step, at which point I remember something I forgot to do on my previous turn. Then I go back to the player aid. I think I was on the 7th step, right from there. I am physically unable to play one turn of any serious solo game.
Gotcha.
But I'm lucky. If anyone asks what's my secret in life, I am insanely lucky. What happened was that when I did Anachrony, the bar was so low that compared to the bar at the time, Anachrony had the greatest solo mode at the time. And the first solo mode for Anachrony by today's standard is fairly terrible. But at the time, it was a jump above what was on the market. And because of that, plus my game that came out at the same time as Anachrony, Days of Ire, was originally a one versus many game, which we then turned into a co-op game because the non-heavy gamers didn't like the versus aspect. And then when it was a co-op game, we could scale it down to one player. So the solo players so between Days of Ire, which didn't have a solo mode, that was just scalable to one player naturally, and Anachrony, which had a good by comparison solo mode, people suddenly were interested in what I have to say by solos. What that meant is that I got volunteers. I got people that wanted to play solos and wanted to love solos. And they were like, you make such great things, can we help you? And I was like, I don't know, is this great? And they said, no, it isn't. I'm like, okay, is this great now? Yeah, but wouldn't it be better that way? I understand what you say, but wouldn't it be even better that way? Yes, why didn't I think of... And then they love it. So for me, solo design is like taste testing other people. It's like, try this. Or, it's the deaf writing the symphony. It's like, you tell me which bit sounded crappy. and amongst those volunteers, Nick was definitely the first. This was even before. Since then, he's also working for Automa Factory and had his own designs and solo mode designs and everything. And then I have John Albertson, who has been with me for, I don't know, 4 years now. Just half of the games he didn't even like. Half of them he absolutely loves. He plays the solo modes and he tells me what he hates about it. And then I say, have you tried that one? And then I say, I don't really care what exactly it does. Make sure it rewards you for building that thing. And then he says, these are the rough things I came up with. And then I say, that's two priorities too many. Nobody wants to read this much. Try now. And I counted about a month ago. I have published 38 solo modes. I think I played 3 of them, or maybe 4. Like ever.
Wow.
Not like ever.
That's crazy.
My method is analyze the game, play it 2-player, ask the other player what they're thinking while I'm playing, and then reproduce and then create a cardboard card, whatever thing that allows them to think the same thing. And then ask somebody who actually likes this sort of thing to tell me which part of it is not fun.
What advice would you have for somebody who's like designing their own game who maybe is going to try to jump into like, hey, I want to design a solo mode?
The theory behind it. So, first step, how to make a good solo mode. Make a good game. Second step, yes, but is it really a good game or do you just think it's a good game? And then do that for 4 more steps. And then once you get down to it, then why is it a good game? Is it a good game because of what I'm thinking about while it's not my turn? Or is it a good game because it has a cool story and I enjoy the epic resolution? If it's the latter, you're probably not going to make my kind of great solo mode for it. Because when you and I play, I don't know, Cyclades together, which is a fairly Euro-Ameritrashy hybrid game, neither of us say, oh, what you do feels random. Sure, there is a die roll, sure, there's a chaos of bidding, but we both understand that we're working on the same framework. But if I created a bot for Cyclades that said, flip this card, roll the die, that's how many of your soldiers it killed, you would be like, why did I deserve that? Like, what could I have done against this? It feels unfair. Whereas it's exactly as fair as the human game, but there is no psychology in it. You're looking at a piece of cardboard. So my kind of, I call them interactive automas. Interactive automas work best for games where the quality of your, how smart you feel depends on what you understand about your game and the other player's game. And then the job of the solo mode is to recreate as many of those decisions and as many of those understandings and metrics of the game as possible without requiring such a long procedure to resolve that resolving that procedure takes you out of your own game. And where this is an ever-evolving art is that Morten Monrad Peters and the man who invented modern automas started from the let's make it simple and how can we make it smarter, whereas I started from let's make it smart and let's try to make it simpler, and the solution is as always both.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Cardboard Creations, David. Oh man, it's been really great talking to you and getting insight on this crazy, really interesting and different backstory for creating Excavation Earth. So you had the second wave, which is the partial Kickstarter bundle mini expansion that adds some modules, and this belongs in a museum. New expansion coming in 2022, probably going to be on Kickstarter around the time that this episode airs. I'm certainly looking forward to checking it out and, seeing what it adds to Excavation Earth. I also, I'm a big fan of your work, and I still have not played Days of Ire or Nights of Fire, but they are on my list. I'm getting into it because I'm getting more and more into war games, so definitely want to check.
Days of Fire is not at all a war game, and Nights of Fire is only a war game for people that don't play war games.
Okay, shall I say historical board games? Not necessarily just war games.
Conflict Euro is my preferred term because Defense of Procyon is a conflict Euro and it's not historical. It's a sci-fi
conflict
space
Euro.
battle.
I like it. Yeah. I like it. Conflict Euro. Well, yeah. Yes. Either way, I'm looking forward to it and just like seeing what else you are working on. Going to be checking it all out. So thanks again for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching Cardboard Creations. Hopefully it's been as inspiring and fascinating for you as it has been for me. And remember, the only way to get something done is to start doing it.